Good evening and welcome to Live United, where we share stories about the great work that's going on in the Monadnock region. And today I am joined by Damien Licata. Damien is with the Monadnock Peer Support Agency. Welcome, Damien.
Thank you.
And thank you for being with us. You know, lots of things happening in society right now around mental health issues, and I know that's an area of focus for your organization. Damien, in case folks don't know it, is former fame here on Cheshire TV with the men's room and with the padded room. And Damien, tell us about Monadnock Peer Support Agency.
Sure. So we're a peer support agency for adult consumers of mental health services. That just means that individuals who take part in our services, who participate in our activities and groups, merely have to self-identify as having challenges around emotional issues and mental health. There's no documentation required or anything like that. We have a full calendar of support groups, peer support groups, and activities throughout the week, every day, except we're not open on weekends. That may be changing, though, in the future, and we can say a little bit more about that. But we're a consumer-run organization, which is to say that all of the staff, including myself, all have lived experience with mental health challenges. And our board, by contract, is 51% consumers as well. So it's a consumer-run, peer-run organization. All the groups are facilitated by peers. You obviously can't do peer support if you're not a peer, if you don't have that shared experience by definition. And we are an independent 501c3, but we're under contract with the Bureau of Behavioral Health of the state of New Hampshire to provide peer support services.
So the peer support aspect of things makes your agency very unique because there's a lot of mental health services out there.
Yes.
What would be the benefit, really, to a peer support piece to mental health? Mm-hmm.
Well, it's a good question, and I think we have to talk about, when we talk about peer support, a lot of people don't know what that means necessarily. And there are a lot of different versions of what peer support is. So what we do is a very specific kind of peer support, and it's called intentional peer support. It was developed by Sherry Mead, who started the first peer support agency like ours in the state of New Hampshire in Claremont, Stepping Stone. And it's peer support with an intention. So when we think of peer support, we often think of folks who have a shared experience. I think we all know what that means. But sort of being able to say, I identify with what you're going through. I've been there, and they can provide that sort of empathy, and that's all certainly true of the kind of peer support that we do as well. But the difference, I think, is the intention piece. We do peer support with an intention, and that intention is to support each other in being able to sort of step outside of our own stories about ourselves, the sort of ways that we've come to identify ourselves as mentally ill or as a diagnosis or as a patient, and to sort of step outside of that and to start moving towards something, towards who and what we want from life. So it's an expanding and empowering kind of peer support, and that's the primary difference, I think, in what we offer. I think that folks who have been, particularly in mental health services for a long time, really have come to think of themselves in those terms, in the sort of diagnosis, symptom, the relationship between patient or client and service provider or therapist is something they know very well. But when they come in the doors at our agency, it's something different. And often I think folks, because it's the relationship they're used to, they will look to our staff the way they would normally look at another service provider. And it takes some getting used to for folks to realize that we're peers and that we're not there to necessarily problem solve or to fix things, but to have conversations in which are mutually supportive and in which we can co-learn together, and as I said, to move forward and move towards something.
So do the peers involved with the program also provide leadership for all the different events and activities you have, the different groups and things you have going on?
Right. Our staff provides the group facilitation or co-facilitation. Sometimes there's more than one facilitator. Sometimes a paid staff person will do facilitating with one of our member participants as a co-facilitator. Some of our members will, at some point, sometimes, facilitate a group on their own. But all of our activities are, as you say, sort of led by paid staff, and we're all trained in intentional peer support, certified by the state in intentional peer support, and so we sort of walk that line between paid staff person and peer.
Now, how common is this type of programming here in New Hampshire and also nationwide?
Well, in New Hampshire, it's more common than you'd think. There are actually 10 peer support agencies like the one we have in Keene, located throughout the state, one in every region, just like the community mental health centers are, like MFS is for us, for example, in the Monadnock region. So there's quite a few. There's a network of them. Some of them have, like in the North Country, have actually several satellite locations because they're so spread out up there. And nationwide, there are peer programs, but we are fairly unique in our approach to peer support in New Hampshire through these peer support agencies. A number of states are going in the direction of certified peer specialists, which is really a function of economics more than anything else, because they've come to be recognized as being Medicaid billable.
That's interesting. So let's talk a little bit about the economics of this, because I think one of the things I read about the programming is that it is a cost savings ultimately.
It is overall. Yes, that in terms of the costs that are incurred that you don't necessarily see as obviously being tied to mental health, but some are. There are, because of the folks utilize our system, and we, by the way, do surveys and quality control, and we have, we have information to back this up, but folks who come to our center utilize our services regularly, do utilize the hospital less. They go into, for example, the mental health unit locally less, if at all, when they start to become involved in our center. The emergency rooms are used less. It eases the burden on law enforcement and the judicial system in our area, because, like everywhere, many folks who are dealing with mental health challenges often, find themselves encountering the criminal justice system. And it eases the burden on the community mental health center as well, and on crisis services. And all of these things are saving money. It's much less expensive for the state to invest in the peer support agencies and have folks utilize those services than to end up in the hospital.
Well, that makes sense. Let's talk a little bit about the type of person you're serving, because I believe you serve men, women, the whole Monadnock region.
That's right.
And maybe you can talk a little bit more about some of the demographics of the area you're serving. So, what's a typical person you might see coming in your door?
Well, let's see. It's hard to say what's typical. I think that there are, of course, they're all adults. And I think that it would be nice at some point in the future to be able to see an adolescent program similar to what we do for adults. But in our program, they are adults. They are, as you say, men and women. Age-wise, there's a big range. There's from 20s, on up. We have older adults as well. So it's a pretty big range. There are folks in terms of their I don't know what to describe it as the level of their challenges in terms of their mental health. that can be all over the map as well. There are a number of folks who who do very well independently in the community, have jobs or in school, but need that extra support, or like to be able to come to a community and spend some time in a community where they don't have to worry about stigma and judgment. And that's another really important piece of what we offer. And there's other folks who, at the other end of the spectrum, could be dealing with things like severe mental illness, schizophrenia, who struggle with all of the accompanying symptoms for that, and but are able to again be accepted into our community, not be made to feel uncomfortable by their experiences, be able to safely share what those experiences are without judgment.
So are you dealing at all with post-traumatic stress disorder and seeing, especially I think of our veterans coming back,
Sure.
and
Yep.
we recognize that that's become a real issue in terms of people's wellness when they
Yes.
return.
Yes. And we do. We currently are not offering a veterans group specifically, but that is something that we're looking at. I know that in all areas of social services now, there are a lot of programs being developed specifically for veterans, and for good reason. But we do offer a trauma support group, which encompasses all kinds of trauma. And we do have some veterans who come to our center who do utilize that group. Also, I happen to think that a lot of mental illness is trauma-based, things that people may not necessarily think of as being trauma-based. So we're always sort of talking about trauma.
It's interesting that you bring that up, because I think of some of the assessment that's just been done in the Monadnock region, and recognizing that stress is a huge contributing factor to people's mental well-being here in the region. And that we have a bit higher rate of people identifying that stress is significantly impacting them here in the region. So it can be quite a range. You can have that, that stress-related. Sometimes it's just coping with the daily life, parenting, life skills,
Sure.
the economy, all of those things, all the way to that trauma-related that you're talking about. And then there's
Yep.
the genetic end of it.
Right.
And we can't forget that.
Yes.
And I think there's a lot more openness now in our culture to begin to really look at some of the mental well-being of people.
I think so. I think that people are starting to feel more. I think because of some modeling that's been done and with folks who are in the public eye who are coming out and saying, yes, I have dealt with bipolar for all my life, or depression or other things. That it's becoming that is so very important in terms of addressing the stigma of mental illness. And I think that oftentimes the stigma that accompanies mental illness has a more devastating effect on people's lives than the mental illness itself. And so it's really important that people be able to feel comfortable talking about their experiences, like I say, without experiencing that judgment and stigma. So yes, I think that one of the most important things that we can do is educate people about mental illness, and that probably many, if not most, of the people have had at some point in their lives, some lived experience with mental illness.
I think it touches almost every family that's out there, or every individual in society at some point in their lives.
Absolutely.
Whether it's what we see in the media or in our own personal lives. And we definitely do see it. Tell me a little bit more. You mentioned before the show started that there's some things happening here in New Hampshire that you
Yes.
wanted to alert the public to.
Yeah, there are some things, and you may have seen some coverage in the newspaper, but there was recently a lawsuit brought against the Bureau of Behavioral Health in the state of New Hampshire by the Department of Justice, the feds, and the Disability Rights Center in Concord, the Basildon Legal Center, and a group of consumers. And they brought the suit against the state of New Hampshire and the Bureau around violations of the Olmstead Act. Now, the Olmstead Act was something that was passed back in John F. Kennedy's time, and it addresses the importance of providing the least restrictive setting possible for mental health services. So that, of course, at that time, that had a lot to do with getting people out of the hospitals, the mental hospitals. But it has much broader importance as well now. When we're talking about an emphasis more on community-based services, things that alternatives to hospitalization, supports in the community, housing in the community, group housing, things like that. And there was a very they did an assessment of our services and found that we were very deficient in this state. We used to be #1 in the country for mental health services, and we are now at the bottom of the list in terms of mental health services in New Hampshire, and it's really unfortunate. In part, it's been a budgetary thing, in large part. Budget cuts have been pretty consistent almost every year in mental health services, and it's finally reached the point where the pot is small, and what's been prioritized has been money for the state hospital and for these kinds of remedies. And so now with this lawsuit has been settled. The state entered into a settlement in this lawsuit, and it's going to require the state to do a number of things. And among those things are increased support of the peer support agencies. One very obvious way is that they are mandating that peer support agencies be operating a minimum of 8 hours a day for 5.5 days a week. Now, that's an increase over what we operate now. That's 44 hours, I think, and we're only at around 35. So that will have to be funded. We will need to be able to pay staff and keep the lights on for those additional hours. But it'll have to happen. The legislature will have to budget for it because it's now going to be mandated by this settlement.
Boy, that's fascinating because when I think of New Hampshire and some of what we've gone through, probably the last 4 years or so, we have seen a tremendous decrease in all the behavioral health services, which are so intimately linked together as well.
That's
When
right.
you think of mental health and mental well-being, and we look at the history of substance abuse, for example, and its relationship with those two things,
Yeah.
boy, what a connection. And we've seen funding cuts across the state in those two areas that have been severe and devastating.
Right. Absolutely. And it's resulted in personnel cuts. Even at the state level, at the Bureau itself, their staff is drastically reduced. They currently have someone in there who's an interim director of the Bureau who used to be the director a number of years ago, some 10 years ago or so, or more. And he was really surprised to see the changes just in the number of people working there now compared to the way it used to be. But I know that the Community Mental Health Center, Monadnock Family Services, has been struggling with budget cuts, every year, and the hospitals have been as well. So hopefully this will be the beginning of the pendulum swinging the other way.
Boy, I hope so. What kind of advocacy can people be doing in relation to that?
Well, I certainly think that they should be advocating with their state representatives to make sure that these changes in services be adequately funded. I think that that's the most important thing that they can do. And I know that the various programs like ours that are working with the mental health community are always advocating ourselves and at the state level. But the more voters they hear from, the more difference it's going to make.
Want to remind the audience that you can go to newhampshire.gov And if you look at on the right-hand side, I believe, on that web page, you can see the list of our senators and our state reps here for the Monadnock region. Reach out to them. Make sure you're advocating on these types of issues because they are critical to the well-being here in the Monadnock region of all of our citizens. Because we mentioned earlier that mental health touches everyone at some point in their life.
That's right.
Let's talk a little bit about your needs because you're you're consumer driven.
Yeah.
But I would guess that you probably have other needs. I think when I looked on your website, one of the things I saw is you need a love seat right now
Right.
for people to sit on. So what are
Right.
some of the other things that
Yep.
you're in need of?
Yeah, things like, well, one of the things that we're doing right now is we're preparing a space for a crisis respite bed, or bedroom. And so bedroom furnishings, towels, linens, twin size, things like that are things we always need. We always need, we have a kitchen at our facility, and we are always in need of things for, utensils, pots and pans, storage containers, that sort of mundane sort of stuff, but it really, adds up if we have to go out and purchase all of these things. We did recently get a donation. It's not physically at our site yet, but hopefully will be soon, of a washer and dryer. Our washer and dryer almost simultaneously, failed us, so we needed to get new ones. And so things like that are always welcome. And the community is generous. I mean, people will spontaneously, they'll see our newsletter. We have a wish list on there, as you said. And people will spontaneously just show up with things. Art supplies for our arts and crafts group, things like that. Are always needed. Those kinds of consumables we always need to replace.
People are very giving here in the Monadnock region.
They
In
really
fact,
are.
in the state of New Hampshire, the Monadnock region is probably one of the most giving regions. Not always in the financial end of things, but in those kinds of donations of time in particular,
Right.
and goods.
Yes.
And those can become very, very important to the sustainability of an organization.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
again, reminding the audience that it's important to think about how not only you can advocate, and that's advocating at a local and a state level, but how you can give as well. And sometimes that's just giving time. If somebody wanted to reach out to the agency, how would they do that?
Well, they can call us, certainly. I think our phone number's been on the screen. It's let me see if I get it right, 352-5093. You can also contact us through our website, which is monadnockpsa.org. And and you can email us at that same address, at my name, dlicata, at monadnockpsa.org. Or you can just stop by. We're at 64 Beaver Street here in Keene.
And people can connect with you via Facebook. I know we have a lot
That's
of
right.
social media users out there.
Yep.
So that's a great way to reach out as well.
Yeah, we have an active Facebook page. Gets a lot of attention. So that's a good place to get current information too about what's going on. The website is also updated regularly though.
And another great way for our audience to reach out is through 211, which if you can't remember any of the rest of this, just remember those numbers, 211. And if you call that number, they can refer you and provide the information. You can also go to the United Way website
Right.
and find that information.
Yep.
Because you are a United Way agency. We're
absolutely.
thrilled to have you as a partner with
That's
us.
right. That's right.
So how do you feel like the work that you do makes a difference out there?
Well, I think as I said, I think it makes a huge difference in terms of providing an alternative and a complement to traditional mental health services. I don't ever say that people should, utilize peer support. You don't need, traditional mental health services. That is absolutely not the case. I think, though, that it complements it very well. I do think it's, in fact, a vital component to recovery to be involved in peer support. I think that what we provide is a an environment and an opportunity in which growth can happen. And oftentimes people feel stuck, or they're in a sort of survival or maintenance sort of mode of existence. And it's just wonderful to watch people come in the door and start to open up and start to think about possibility. I actually worked for several years at Monadnock Family Services, and I see many of the same people now at our agency that I saw then, but they're different people. In that setting, they're very different people, and I realized that I never really knew them that well. I only knew them in the context, that limited context of that provider-client relationship. And that I think that being able to come to a place where people can really be themselves and contribute to the community, because it is a community that everybody is a part of. As I said, they're involved in the decision making of anything that happens over there, but they're also involved in just maintaining the culture of the community, in just doing things like washing the dishes, and it really is a kind of safe haven for a lot of folks.
Well, it really provides that opportunity for a sense of belonging.
That's right.
And everybody in life wants to belong somewhere and have friends and be connected to other people. And I think sometimes, with mental health issues, you can feel very alone. And it sounds like you're providing an opportunity for people to be connected, to feel like they have a relationship, a connection, a responsibility for their own well-being, but at the same time that peer support to really accomplish that.
That's right. And responsibility for your own well-being is an important piece.
Yeah.
I think that one of the things that one of the important components of the peer relationship as we practice it is that idea of mutual responsibility for the relationship and for our own recovery. So, it's very easy, I think, sometimes for folks when they first get a diagnosis, especially, to feel a huge amount of relief, because now a lot of what they're experiencing at least has an explanation. It has a name. It's it's not just me. But what that can lead to oftentimes is, therefore, I don't have to do X, Y, Z. I need a lot of taken care of. And I can sort of abdicate responsibility for my own life. That can happen over time, and that's very different from the kind of thing that intentional peer support tries to encourage.
It's really about respecting yourself.
It is, very much it is, and respecting each other, and an appreciation for how past experience can affect us, and the importance of acknowledging other people's past experiences and their worldview and how it affects how they think about themselves and others. But its past is not necessarily determinant of future.
So you've touched on a couple of things that are future directions you're looking at. I think you mentioned respite at the top of the show, and that you were going to talk a little bit more about that, and that this legislation's happening. That could definitely have some impact on expansion.
Yep.
What are some of the other future directions?
Well, let me say a little bit more about respite first, if I can, because I think that's really important. And if we're looking for ways to support our agency, I think that mentioning the importance and the need for respite, crisis respite in this community is something that you can be talking about. What crisis respite is, for folks who don't know, is it's a 24-hour bed, essentially. It is staffed 24 hours by peers, and it is an alternative to going into the hospital. Many folks, more than you might even realize, in this community, and this is pretty universal, will have come to utilize the hospital as a way of coping with emotional distress. And that's really not what it's intended for. But there aren't any alternatives. They've sort of reached this point where they just can't, they need a break. They need to get to be somewhere where they can think, where they can sort out their feelings, where they can just get through a particularly rough spot, rough patch in emotionally. And and they've come to utilize emergency services, the emergency room, hospitalization as a way of doing that. The criteria for getting to the hospital is usually you need to be a danger to yourself or others. Folks who utilize the hospital aren't always necessarily a danger to themselves or others, but they know what they need to say to get in. And that's really a misuse of those services, and that are very much needed for people who really are in acute distress and really need that level of care. But crisis respite provides an alternative to that, where folks can call up, somebody will come and get them, they can come to the bed, they can spend up to a week there, and it would be right on site at our center. So during the day, they have access to all of our programming, to that community of peers, and it's proven very successful. There is one crisis respite operating right now in Claremont. There are a couple of others that are in the process of opening, one in Nashua and one up in the North Country, and there really is a need for that here. So, but we don't have one. And there are some folks who will even go to Claremont because they appreciate the value of going there instead of the hospital. But many, many more would utilize that service if it were right here in town.
It seems like that would also, you talked about stigma earlier, and would really also reduce some of the stigma attached to that you can just go in. We all face crises and moments in life where we're overwhelmed, and we're really questioning, what do we do with that? And instead of ending up in the emergency room, really you're providing an opportunity, and when I think of the peer support aspect of that, an opportunity to not only sort of deal with whatever's going on in your present, but to be responsible for that, and to have that friendship, and again, that sense of belonging with someone local to really integrate you right back into society and your family and your citizenship here.
That's right.
So, it seems to me that would be a really effective...
and sometimes you need to just be able to talk about, even to be able to say, you know what, I just want to die, without it triggering a whole process that lands you in the hospital. We operate a warm line that every evening from 5 to 10 o'clock, people can call our phone number, and they will get up here at the other end, and they can talk about anything they need to talk about. They don't need to be in crisis to use it. They can be, though. The operators are trained, but many people just want to reach out and make a connection on that phone. But oftentimes people will call, and they'll say things like that. They'll say things that sound like, they must be suicidal. And in fact, what they're just doing is trying to express that they're in pain. And so they can have a conversation with somebody about that pain, about what they're experiencing, without it being, I need to call 911. And oftentimes by the end of that conversation, they feel that they've been heard, that they've made a connection, and they've also sort of gotten a different language to be able to talk about what they're feeling than just this kind of suicidal language.
Now, is that the same phone number that you mentioned previously?
It is.
So could you repeat that number then? And this is for the warm line.
This is for the warm line, and it's 352-5093.
And the hours on that again?
It's from 5 to 10 p.m. every night, 365 nights a year, Christmas, New Year's, that's in operation.
And those are critical times. We know
Absolutely.
that people oftentimes are feeling isolated at those holidays,
right,
as they come up.
Yep.
So
the isolation, I'm sorry to interrupt, the isolation is really an important piece, and you mentioned that earlier. Weekends can be difficult. We've had a lot of folks who say, I wish you were open on the weekends. The weekends are really hard for me. I dread, the weekends and just can't wait till Monday comes around again and I can come back over. And with the expanded hours, we'll probably be adding a half a day on Saturday, which is will help. It's not the whole weekend, but it will definitely make a difference. But folks who are isolated, they use the warm line to make that connection. Oftentimes transportation is an issue. and we do provide transportation for folks who want to come in the morning. We'll go out and get them, and then we'll bring them back at the end of the day. We also provide transportation once a week to the pharmacy, the food pantry, the grocery store, for folks who are also, isolated.
So who are some of the folks that you collaborate with here in the Monadnock region?
Well, we collaborate with the Monadnock Center for Violence Prevention. We do a lot of cross referrals with those folks, with the most obvious, which is the Mental Health Center, Monadnock Family Services, and again, there's referrals back and forth. There's advocacy that we do on behalf of our member participants who feel like, well, I need somebody to go with me to this appointment to help me get be heard, to facilitate a conversation, and we'll do that for folks. But we collaborate with that agency on other things as well. We're doing a peer support group. They've recently opened a new program over on Vernon Street, which is a day program of groups, educational groups that they provide over there, and we are doing a group at that site, a peer support group right there. That's a first-time collaboration of that type between our agencies, and it's going really well. We're really pleased with that. So we collaborate with the college, Keene State. We currently have an intern from the college, which is really fun. This is the first time we've had an intern from the college, and that's going very well. And it's a psychology student, and it gives her an opportunity to learn about an aspect of mental health that she won't learn about in school. I know I went through that formal education in psychology, and peer support is barely talked about, if at all. So it's great to have that collaboration. We collaborate with Antioch here in Keene on a community garden. We set up 6 large raised beds for vegetables with their help, and they provided technical assistance as well, and had a bumper crop last year, and are looking forward to getting it planted in the spring again. So that's just to name a couple of collaborations that we have. We also have individuals who come in, and we have, for example, Nancy Salwin, who does music education in the community, comes in and does a music group also once a month. We have some local artists who come in and do things with folks for our arts and crafts group.
So we have respite happening. We have an expansion to potentially half days on Saturdays. Got some great collaborations going on out there, and we know how enriched we are by the interns that come to us from both Keene State, Antioch, River Valley, lots of the area colleges. Yeah. And as you mentioned, just a great learning experience for them to put it into real practice.
That's right.
Any other things that our public should be aware of that are happening?
Well, I'd ask you to keep a lookout for fundraising efforts that we're going to be doing in the future. We have a couple of ideas of things that we want to do. We are looking to in the spring to do a dance, a Mad Hatter's Ball, and where folks will come in various creative kinds of hats, and we'll have a contest and judging for that. But we'll have live music and dancing and some food. So and that will be a fundraiser that we hope to be able to do annually. So keep an eye out for that. I don't have dates yet, but and we're also looking more long term to do something that's also will be part of a community education in addition to fundraising, and that's based. I don't know if you're familiar with the vagina monologues that gets done at the college every year, and which is a really great venue for public education about women's issues. And we're looking at doing something called the Mad Monologues, which will be a similar kind of thing, based on actual stories and interviews with folks about their lived experience, their experience with mental illness, with the community mental health system, I mean the larger mental health system, and stigma in the community and so on. It'll touch on some gender issues as well, where gender intersects with mental illness and things like that. So that's a longer-term project. It involves some development of a script and so on. We have been talking with Keene State about collaboration on that, and when we're further along in the development, they will hopefully get involved. So.
Boy, some exciting things beginning to brew and happen there.
Yeah.
That's good news. Good news for our citizens and good news for the region. Again, if people wanted to reach out to you, how would they do that? And this is from both sides of the mountain, because our show is on YouTube and it's posted on Facebook.
Yep.
So if anybody wanted to reach out to you, whether they're from Antrim or they're from Hinsdale or they're in between.
Right. Yeah, just call that number or email us. As I said, we're happy to talk to anybody on the phone about what our program is about and what we have to offer. You're welcome to come by and visit to see what it's like. If you're a family member, you're welcome to come by and see what it's like. If you have an adult family member who you think could benefit from it, you're welcome to bring them along. And we also will come and get folks. As I said, we run that van, and we'll go pretty far afield. Monadnock region's a pretty big region, but we try to get to everyone.
And you do serve the population that is 18 and up.
18
correct?
and up, that's correct. Yep.
So keep that in mind, audience, because again, mental health issues touch many of us and touch our family members and people we may know. Want to also remind folks that Mental Health Awareness Month will be coming up here. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, that's again, that's about raising awareness about mental health issues, and there are a number of things that happen around that time. I know that we would like to be able to see if we can do some sort of event. We did a collaboration with MFS a few months ago on the square. That was a candlelight vigil for folks who could light a candle for anybody that they knew who had that experience. And the idea was to sort of raise awareness about the fact that there are that it is so much more common than people think it is. But we're going to be looking at doing something hopefully again that has that sort of public education component to it.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank you for joining me on the show today, Damien. Some important information out there. People can look forward to the Mad Hatter Ball that's coming up. Will be a great fundraiser for this issue. I look forward to participating in that. Yep. Also, again, reminding you, audience, that this show is about giving, advocating, and volunteering, and there's opportunities with the Monadnock Peer Support Agency to do all of those things. Whether it be here locally with the agency or at the state level when it comes to mental health issues. So we encourage you to get involved, to join with Damien and others that are doing the good work out there. We also remind you that you can share your stories about how you're living united in the Monadnock region by contacting us at MUW@liveunited.org. And we do hope you share your stories. We want to thank you for joining us tonight. And again, Damien, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.